today I'm going to give an overview of IoT, Internet of Things technologies, and what we do about these technologies at InfoVista, especially in network planning and optimization, which is the area I'm responsible with at InfoVista. So the agenda of today's presentation is really to start about presenting IoT as a technology and to understand how the growth in the number of devices is linked with the type of connectivity that IoT comes from. Then we'll go through the range of technologies that exist and how these technologies map with the different types of applications that are supported by IoT technologies. I'll give a brief overview of LPWA technologies, what are the similarities between the LoRa, the UNB type of technologies like Sigfox, or the RPMA technologies that Ingenious is using, and basically explaining the main trade-off in LPWA technologies that exist between coverage and data rates. And then we'll talk about cellular IoT, basically IoT technologies that are standardized by the 3GPP, so that's LTE, CAT-M, and LTE and BOT that are getting a lot of traction these days. And a few more emphasis on NB-OT and the different deployment options that it comes with. So clearly a number of devices is expecting to grow very significantly, but not because of classical cellular technologies, only because of IoT technologies. If you look at this report from Ericsson here, you can see that the growth in the number of devices is not expected to grow by a large factor, whether for fixed phones, mobile phones, or even for tablets, even though they are pretty trendy. The growth is really expected to happen on IoT, whether that's for non-cellular IoT services or through the extension of 4G to IoT technologies. So the challenges that come with IoT, I've put them in about 5 categories in this slide here. First one is cost. Obviously, we cannot expect IoT services to generate as much revenue as typical broadband services. Actually, the expectations from the analysts show that the revenue from IoT is going to be fairly small initially, despite all the hype around IoT. So it's critical for the success of these services that the cost of the device remains extremely low. So we're going to go from high cost, low volume type of devices, such as the smartphones that we all have today, to low cost devices, less than $1 probably eventually, but hundreds of devices to replace the one smartphone that we have today. Not to replace, but to go on top of the smartphone that we have today. The second challenge is battery life. We are talking about devices that will be always on, that will be mostly unattended. So it's critical for this, for the success of these services, that the battery of those devices can run for years, probably for up to 10 years, in order for the device to continue working without requiring you to charge it up or to replace the battery. Service diversity is key as well, and we can see that especially with non-cellular LPWA technologies such as LoRa and Sigfox. These technologies will survive providing there is a large ecosystem of applications that is being developed around them. Without the ecosystem of application, the technology itself has very little value. And it will be quite important to be as creative as possible for the application developers in order to support and bringing new use cases that rely on these technologies and that are innovative enough to be successful. Coverage is a challenge. We are talking about devices that must be connected almost anywhere and everywhere, and the challenge with coverage comes from the fact that most, if not all, of the IoT technologies that we are talking about today are operating in unlicensed bands, where there will be constraints. Those technologies will not operate by themselves in these bands. They will compete with other technologies, and they will interfere with other technologies. So that's one big challenge to cope with. And finally, capacity. Even though that's probably the least problematic challenge today for the operators deploying these new services and these new technologies, because it's just beginning, and by definition there is no capacity problem initially, but as soon as these services become successful, capacity is going to become a key challenge. If we are talking about hundreds of thousands of devices operating in the same unlicensed bands, soon enough there will be a capacity crunch. So now let's see what these technologies are and how they apply to different use cases and different requirements and constraints from a technology point of view. You can say that one of the main one category of use cases for IoT technologies is related to surveillance, and that's requires throughput because we're talking about video. That requires latency as well, because obviously the video cannot be delayed in order to provide a meaningful service. And here the technology requires that the trade-off between data rates and coverage is not too steered toward coverage, because video requires throughput. If you think about another range of application, such as connected cars or connected homes, throughput is less of an issue, but we still have a lot of information to transmit, but not video. Latency is critical. You can imagine that your connected cars will involve delay when communicating with the networks. You want to be informed about what's happening close to your driving environment as soon as it's happening. Otherwise, I guess no one will trust connected cars or connected homes. So these requirements are a little bit different and will probably require a slightly different technology, and the evolution of today's technologies, not just the Cat1 technology, but Cat-M at least, and probably NB-IoT eventually, and 5G when it comes to the market. And finally, there is a whole new range of applications that goes from smart meters to transportation systems, environment-related applications, healthcare-related, and more generally industry-related applications, where the biggest driver for these services is cost, and of course battery life in order for these devices to remain unattended. And here really it's unclear whether the 3GPP standardized technologies will be able to compete with the well-established non-cellular technologies such as LoRa and Sigfox. So there will be a fight, that's in this category, that there will be a fight between cellular and non-cellular technologies. And it will depend on other factors, probably security related, to decide which of the technologies will win some of these markets. So from a technical point of view, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the basic trade-offs that enables these technologies to provide coverage in a wide area with devices that transmit very little power compared to the typical broadband devices, the smartphones and the tablets that we use today. And that's a very basic trade-off from a technological point of view. It's really the trade-off between coverage and capacity, or between coverage and data rates. In regular applications today, devices transmit a fair amount of power, but over a wide frequency band. Whereas with LPWA, the principle is that we can transmit even less power, so to save on battery and to ensure that the device costs less, but over a much reduced bandwidth, which means that spectrum density point of view, we're actually transmitting more with these technologies, so allowing the device to reach further within the environment while transmitting less power, saving battery and saving cost for the device. So that's really the basic challenge that is applied to most LPWA technology, if not all, that allows reaching that kind of coverage with so much power being transmitted. An example of LPWA technology is what is being used by Sigfox, ultra narrowband. So with ultra narrowband, the channel is divided in very small chunks of frequency, where the band is as low as 100 Hz. That's extremely low when you compare to what is used in regular LTE bands today, where the minimum is 1.4 MHz. So we're much lower, and that allows covering wide areas, as you can see here, the coverage that Sigfox is claiming for Western Europe with a fairly small number of cells, and that allows keeping the network deployment at a reasonable cost, hence providing services that are again very cheap compared to the broadband services. The goal being to increase the number of devices without creating services that cost way too much for the service providers. So Sigfox is operating in a licensed spectrum around the 900 MHz in the US and slightly below 900 MHz in Europe. So that again is an advantage of these technologies, to be able to operate in a licensed spectrum, which is the same for LoRa. LoRa is based on an architecture that's called LoRaWAN, where the cells or the transmitter antennas are referred to as gateways, and the gateways are connecting to network servers in different type of topology. But really the principle is fairly similar. The difference between LoRa and Sigfox UNB technology is that LoRa is not based on UNB. It's based on a variant of spread spectrum technologies, not direct sequence, a little bit different than direct sequence to save on a few compromises. But the principle is close to what is being used with 3G technologies and spread spectrum. The advantage of these over UNB is that you can play with the spreading factor, and you can adapt the data rates and the trade-off between data rates and coverage by playing with the spreading factor. The channel bandwidth is 125 kilohertz, which is a bit higher, but again, playing with the spreading factor is the way that LoRa has to adjust the coverage to the requirements in terms of throughput. IPMA has a very similar architecture to LoRa. The technology is quite similar as well. It's based on spread spectrum, although that's direct sequence with RPMA. The main difference with RPMA technology that is used by Ingeniu is the spectrum that's being used. Still a licensed spectrum, but at 2.4 GHz, so higher frequency band, which essentially means that from a coverage point of view, it's more challenging to cover the same areas with the same number of cells. It's basically impossible. You need a bit more cells to cover the same area. The main advantage of using the 2.4 GHz band is that it's available worldwide, as opposed to the bands being used by Sigfox and LoRa that are not available worldwide, and you need to have different bands for different countries. So you're saving on device costs when you're able to provide just one single device and manufacture just one single device that can be used worldwide to serve your applications. That's really the main difference of IPMA. The evolution of cellular LPWA. So we've been talking with LoRa, Sigfox, Ingeniu, providers of non-cellular, so technologies that are not standardized by the 3GPP. If we now talk about what's been standardized with 3GPP, over the past few years, we've seen new categories of device of LTE devices from Cat 4 to Cat 1 to even Cat 0, where basically the goal was to reduce peak data rates, because IoT services do not require large data rates, but most importantly, reduce the complexity and hence the cost of the device. So going from multiple antennas to single antenna, going from full duplex devices to half duplex devices, reducing the bandwidth to the 20 MHz maximum bandwidth of LTE to 1.4 MHz minimum bandwidth of LTE. So all of that to reduce the cost of the device. With LTE Release 13, it's going even further in that direction and reducing the frequency band to as low as 200 kHz. And that requires a few adaptations to the standard. Of course, if you look at LTE-M, which is LTE with Cat-M devices, you can still use the same structure. So with resource blocks of 180 kHz, you maintain a similar structure, but with NB-IoT, whereby you can transmit IoT information over a single resource block, then it's not possible to transmit the control information over multiple resource blocks anymore. So you need to really adapt a little bit the resource grid to the IoT needs. It's even worse, if I may say, in the uplink, where you have the ability to transmit over a single subcarrier, not a single resource block, a single subcarrier of 200 kHz, so that you can reach even further and basically extend the trade-off between capacity and data rates. So here the adaptation is going a bit further. And NB-IoT comes with a number of deployment models. You can choose to deploy in band, which basically means that you're going to allocate one resource block to NB-IoT traffic, and the rest is going to remain broadband traffic within your LTE band. Guard-bound deployment is possible as well. It seems very attractive at a first look, because you can basically reuse frequency bands that are wasted today. They are not used for any purpose. However, guard-bound deployment for NB-IoT comes with a number of challenges. The main one being regulators are not allowing you, in very few countries now, they are not allowing you to deploy in these bands without going through a painful process of acceptance. Standalone deployments are possible as well. They are typically used when you want to refarm GSM spectrum, so basically turning GSM spectrum into NB-IoT spectrum to enable new services on NB-IoT. I would say that by very far the main requirements that we're seeing today is for in-band deployments, because that allows creating new services with very little impact on regular broadband capacity without involving much risk in the deployment. So let me summarize IoT technologies and their usage in today and tomorrow's networks. So first of all, the growth that is going to happen from a device point of view is primarily due to IoT. It's not going to be due to new smartphones, new tablet applications. It's going to be due to new IoT services being deployed. So that's where growth lies in this industry. IoT comes with a number of challenges. We've talked about them: device cost, coverage, capacity, service availability, battery life, and a number of applications that are widely different. And all of these applications come with different business models that by themselves require new technologies and diversified technologies. So yes, there are a lot of different technologies, cellular, non-cellular PWA technologies, but they all have different business models and different business cases to which they can apply. All of them, however, are based on the same trade-off between coverage and throughput, one that consists in transmitting less power to save on battery, but over a much shorter amount of spectrum. The non-cellular PWA technologies, LoRa, UNB, or PMA, are primarily based on unlicensed spectrum, so security levels are not as strong as the cellular LPWA technologies that work on the same license bands that have been standardized for LTE mainly. So these technologies CATM, available now, very small adaptation to existing devices, and an IoT, which requires a bit more adaptation, but opens up LT for new, more IoT-specific applications. That's it for me today. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. Looking forward to hearing your feedback about this presentation, and available to answer any further question you may have on IoT or any other topic actually related to network planning optimization. Thank you very much.